Hey everyone, this is Rocky from WeLearnChess.com, and I'm here with an endgame puzzle that I just came across on the Chess.com Tactics Trainer. So I thought it was pretty interesting, and I thought I'd share it. White has just captured on b3, so of course black's going to capture back, and we get this position with white to move. It looks like it should be a draw, but white actually has a nice sequence here to force the win. If you want to put your video on pause to see if you can find the whole sequence from start to finish, go ahead and do that. Okay, first I'm going to show how not to play it. If white is just to straight up go for the pawn, then you probably were able to calculate that this wouldn't quite work, because black's going to get to the other pawn here, and it's a draw. So white has to do something else. Now, white does have an extra pawn, but of course it's a doubled pawn. And, well, double pawns sometimes actually can be quite helpful. In the middle game, sometimes having double pawns, especially in the middle files, the central files, can help keep enemy pieces like pesky knights out of important squares in your camp. Of course, towards the end game, double pawns tend to be pretty weak, especially if they're isolated. However, sometimes you can push one of your double pawns to create a breakthrough, or to just create weaknesses in your enemy's pawn structure. And actually you can do that not just with double pawns, just with any pawn. Sometimes you can push a pawn and you know you're going to lose that pawn when your opponent captures it, but then maybe instead of him having a nice pawn chain of 3 connected pawns together, in order to capture your pawn, he's got to split up his pawns and have isolated pawns himself. And a lot of times you can win those pawns back with your rook or king. So, yeah, in this case, though, it looks like it would be hard for white to jettison this pawn, because if he ever plays h6, then black's going to capture on h6, and that also blocks the other h pawn. But there's a way to actually make use of this tactic. So it is the correct strategy to come across and maintain the opposition. Note that if you tried to go up this way, then you'd be letting the black king in, and probably it's still a draw, but it's a little more dangerous than it has to be. So there's no sense letting black get closer than he can, and probably you can't win that way. So at least this way you're keeping the black limited in the squares he can go to. Okay, so we get to this position here, and there's still room for white to make a mistake. We saw obviously going after the pawn would be a mistake. If you try to jettison this pawn and black takes and you go directly for the pawn, then this is also a draw. However, white has 2 pawns here. So after this first one is taken, and it has to be taken, of course, otherwise it's just queening, white has this nice in-between move here with h5. And now we see a common pattern in an endgame where black ends up on the wrong side of the pawn, where he's unable to go to a square to defend his pawn, and now he's just stuck. And he also can't get back to the critical square or the key square to defend against the pawn queening, and now this pawn is just going to march up the board and queen. So it was a pretty nice in-between move here to set up sort of a common pattern. And even when these sort of enemy pawns are blockaded against each other in the middle of the board, sometimes your king can end up on the wrong side of the pawn, and that's happened to me plenty of times where you just get stuck and you have to make a move, and you're basically in zugzwang because you can't go anywhere that's going to protect your pawn, and you're just losing your pawn. So pretty interesting endgame puzzle, and thanks to chess.com for this great tactics trainer. I hope you enjoyed that video. All right.